Well, the mainstream media has the national attention on the rest of the country, and the left has been quietly sinking its talons of control into the major institutions of New England, whether that be the church, whether that be academia, or the big pharmaceutical companies in Boston. There are a lot of big things, or government itself, the corporate boardrooms. There are a lot of big things going on in New England that you might not know about because the mainstream media has you focused on the rest of the country, and your mind might have forgotten about this, the place that actually created America, that started America, this liberal hellscape that's shoved up into the corner of the country that everybody's forgotten about. But we want to let you know that whether good or bad, there is things going on behind enemy lines. So on this segment of Behind Enemy Lines, we've got a doozy for you. So while the Republican Party in D.C. is having all their fun with like the speaker and everything's going on with Israel and Hamas, there's a lot of things going on in New England. So we want to talk about a law that was recently passed and put into effect in Maine, in the great state of Maine, the Pine Tree State, actually. So on May 30th, this bill was passed by the state Senate in Maine and then signed into law by Governor Janet Mills in July. So what is this bill? This bill partially decriminalizes prostitution. So what do you mean by that? Hunter, what do they mean by, well, some people, what does it mean to legalize versus decriminalize?
Legalize means it's free reign. You can do whatever you want and you're not going to be persecuted. Prosecuted for doing something.
Yeah.
Decriminalization means that the thing becomes partially legal. So now it's legal for the prostitutes, but it's not legal to buy.
Yeah.
So the prostitutes, if they're going out and they're on the street and they're saying, "Oh, come have sex with me for however much money," they're not getting in trouble. The guy who actually comes up and agrees to it is getting in trouble.
Yeah.
So the goal of this bill was to protect prostitutes who are being exploited by sex traffickers. And that was their, it's a good intention.
Yes.
However, a good intention.
There is no precedent for this in the United States.
Other than Nevada.
There are a couple counties in Nevada.
Vegas stays in Vegas.
Gosh, yeah, just forget about that. But on a state level, Maine is the first state to actually decriminalize prostitution in any way. So it's now legal for the sex worker to offer it, but still illegal for the person to buy it. So, which is weird. It's like, I feel like that's not going to make it happen less, but I guess the idea is they want these women, if they're taken advantage of by sex traffickers, they want these women to feel like they can come to the system, come to the government and say, "Hey, I was exploited," and not feel like they're going to get thrown in jail because of the law that it's illegal for them to do that. So
right.
they're trying to make it easier for these women to come forward and say, "Hey, I've been taken advantage of. I was sex trafficked," or whatever.
This law isn't all bad, but we're going to get into the depths of it and see what the premise of it rests upon. Like, another thing that the law does is it elevates soliciting children for sex work, which is prostitution, from a misdemeanor to a felony. So I don't know what Maine was doing before, but it was only a misdemeanor.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was only a misdemeanor to try to get a child to be a prostitute, basically.
To pimp out a minor was a misdemeanor in Maine not 2 months ago. What?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Insane. You get a slap on the wrist for that? Yo, that should be death penalty.
That should be hang them. Hang them. Those where you talked about in the first episode, hang them high in the streets.
Hang them high in the streets.
Those are the people. If you're pimping out, not even just minors, any girl, period. If you're a pimp, you can go meet our maker now because you are disgusting.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. So I want to touch on Janet Mills and actually what she did surrounding this bill. So the reason we're talking about this, and we actually have I think we're agreeing more and more as we talk about it. But at first, when we brought this up, there was a slight disagreement. I was like, "This is insane. Why would they do this? There's no precedent." Hunter kind of had a more charitable view of it, like, okay, they want it to make it easy. Am I?
Yeah, no. I wasn't
right?
saying it was good, but I was saying it at least is logical and it's not like completely off the walls crazy.
Yeah, like there's one conservative state rep in Maine. I can't remember her name, but she did support this bill, and she's conservative. As far as I know, she's a Christian because she wanted these girls to be safe.
Right.
I just don't know if that's the best solution because, like, if that was all that there was, and this was the only bill that was presented and signed by Governor Janet Mills in Maine, I'd be like, okay, I understand that. But the part that it confuses me a little bit, and my conspiracy theory, the conspiracy theory and theorist in my heart just kind of gets all riled up when I hear this is that in 2021, virtually the same bill was passed through the state Senate and the state House and the state Senate and sent to Governor Janet Mills' desk to be signed into law. And she vetoed this bill. Yet, and she sent it back to the House. They changed some things, and in 2023, not a few months ago, it was passed, and Janet Mills signed it, and it became a law in October. So, the difference between these two bills was not having anything to do with the prostitution. It was having something to do with the sex traffickers. So, the first bill, it was decriminalized. They decriminalized sex work for the worker. Quote, sex work. Sex work isn't actually work. Come on.
I mean, you're working, but who are you working for? We'll get it. It's all right.
Okay, so the first bill in 2021, she vetoed it. It said it decriminalized prostitution for the sex worker. But that's the same as the one in 2023. But the difference is that the one she vetoed elevated the punishments elevated the punishments for sex traffickers. So they were getting much more severe legal penalties under this bill in 2021. Yet in 2023, those penalties were not there at all. Now, we had obviously good things like raising the soliciting for a minor to have to do, quote, sex work from a misdemeanor to a felony. That's good, obviously. But I wish these things were in separate bills so we could vote on them separately, not all of them just thrown into one big bill. But in any case, why did she veto? The conspiracy theorist in me
it doesn't make any. I hope
what's going on.
Yeah, we hope that there's something else or if that is the only reason why she didn't. I mean, it doesn't make any sense why she vetoed it.
Yeah, I talked to a man, a Christian conservative who was actually friends with Janet Mills, and I asked him about this. Like, why did she veto this bill and then with higher penalties for sex traffickers, and then pass the same bill, virtually the same bill, I think, that has no more increased legal penalties for sex traffickers. I'm like, why? Because there is a huge sex trafficking issue from people from Boston kidnapping or sex trafficking girls in New Hampshire and Maine and bringing them to Boston to do prostitution under the radar. And they're trying to address this issue in Maine. But like I asked him, he's like, why did she do this? And he didn't agree with the bill, but he understood. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but it had something to do with the fact that like there are Scandinavian countries that have decriminalized prostitution for the sex worker, and this has lowered the rates of sex trafficking, and these women are safer. They're able to find help. And I'm like, first impression, I'm like, okay, sure. But first impression, what is the only other issue that American politicians, Bernie Sanders, excuse me, this lapel, oops. What is the only other issue that American politicians compare the Scandinavian system to is socialism? That's the only other thing. It's like, oh, socialism is working for Scandinavia, which isn't true. That's a whole other thing. But socialism's working. And then prostitution. So we have prostitution and socialism.
The two great pillars of society.
Prostitution and socialism.
They've existed throughout human history. Uphold them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, like, I don't understand. I don't understand why, but I think it's important for everybody to know. It kind of flew under the radar, this bill.
But I think it's also, Maine, so. The issue is it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Classic slippery slope. And what I think is, you have this premise that my body, my choice.
Yep.
I can do whatever I want with my body, two consenting adults. We even have a quote from a person, I don't know if she was kind of for the bill, but also not really. She was saying how, and since all sect work is illegal under this model, it also becomes impossible to tell who is being forced to sell sex and who is doing it consensually. So, I think that's where this kind of falls apart. Because, sure, it should be, they should be able to, people who are being exploited should be able to come to the government and report these sex traffickers without being worried about punishment. But can't you do that without decriminalizing prostitution? Can't you just say if a woman who is doing it comes forth that we're not going to prosecute her? Like, isn't that a different issue?
It's different.
You can be more specific. But her argument is that, no, sex work should be legal for people, like, not all sex workers are being trafficked. So, because in this bill, it's still illegal to buy sex work, period.
Yeah.
So she's saying, well, no, that shouldn't be illegal. I oppose this bill because some of us are just out here, we're working together, we're not being trafficked, we just want to make money. So I think it's going to be a slippery slope, and it's going to allow them to pass more bills just completely legalizing it. And they're going to come up with other arguments too. So I think that's kind of the slippery slope. And we've got to talk about this. Do you think sex work is work? Is real work? What do we think about that?
So, okay. Work is biblical. Work did not come after the fall of man.
It came before.
God created work as a good, but work was created before sex was a thing because Eve was not created yet. Work was created before Eve. Okay, so I don't think so. I don't think it can be work because work is also something that's good.
I would say like a lot. It's not even just sex work.
Can you work on something that's bad?
That's a good. All right, we're getting deep.
We're getting deep.
Well, because the question is like. What other things aren't work? Because biblical work is like taking dominion over the earth and advancing, like making the earth more uniform, making the earth more in accordance with God's nature, making it because there was chaos, there was God. I mean, He created the earth perfect, but
work is to bring order out of chaos.
Bring order out of chaos, exactly. So it's not bringing order out of chaos; it's adding to more chaos. And I'd say there's a lot of other things that you could say aren't technically. You could say they're work, but they're not biblical.
So what about organized crime? Because that takes a lot of work and a lot of planning.
Of work. Yeah, I think it's a semantic issue, but I think when the term sex work normalizes it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It kind of makes it seem, oh well, they're just doing their job. You know, they're just making a living, and I think that it puts at the same level as like, oh, a sex worker and a truck driver. You know, they're both working.
Yeah.
Which is like, no, that's not the same thing. So I'd say it is work, but it's not good work. It's not work that like there should be separations of work that we say this work is good, this work is bad. Because even like you're either doing the devil's work or you're doing God's work. You're either for me or you're against me. That's what Jesus says. So you're either working for the devil or you're working for God. And I'd say the truck drivers who are bringing the food to people are probably doing more for God than the people who are sending people's souls to hell by sexual immorality.
Them.
Yeah. So both, it goes, I mean, obviously the person buying prostitution and the women participating in prostitution are both wrong.
Yeah.
So they should both be illegal.
Yes.
So that's why I think this law is obviously unbiblical.
True, but that's in an ideal
That's in
world.
an ideal world. I don't think that this law is necessarily bad, but I also wouldn't say I would pass this law.
Yeah, I would not have voted for this law.
Think that
I would have went on the House floor and said I'm going to vote no on this law, but I'm going to prepare a bill that increases legal penalties for sex traffickers and makes soliciting minors for sex work, prostitution a felony. Yeah, I would make those two separate bills. So I would take the issues. I would take this bill and I would refine it. I would hopefully try to make a clause to remedy some of these issues. If that doesn't work, I would submit my own bills.
Exactly. Like, you don't have to decriminalize all women doing prostitution because some are trafficked. Like, you can say if a woman comes forth and she's being trafficked, that she's exempt because she's a witness of the crime. Like, it's the same thing if you're doing drugs with your friend and your friend goes and, this is a law now, if your friend goes and overdoses, if you call the police, you're not going to get in trouble for doing drugs. You're exempt. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be a similar kind of, that makes sense, a completely logical thing, because you don't want people to be afraid to
We're trying to protect
help.
The victims.
Right.
The spirit of the law is to protect the victims.
Which is, the spirit of the law is good, but in practice, it leads to all kinds of complicated things. Yeah. So that would be our verdict.
It's all over the place sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was number one, guys. That was Behind Enemy Lines. Dude, how do you think that segment went? I kind of liked it. That was fun.
No, that was fun. I think that, it's kind of it's not trivial. Like, it's obviously a big deal, but I think some of the issues can seem trivial, but it's super important when you really think about the underlying roots and other underlying beliefs about the bill that are causing the bill.
Yeah.
And to really get into whether it's Because ultimately, we should judge by God's standard.
For sure.